for coming tonight. I won't be too long. I'll speak to about 6:45 about Ubu specifically, and then we'll have some time for some questions. So it'll be a short thing. I don't know. I'll assume a general familiarity with the site. That is Ubu, but basically, Ubu is the internet's largest site for the avant-garde, whatever that means. I'm still not sure what that means. And I began it in 1996, initially as a site for visual and concrete poetry. So you get these beautiful poems just like this, very simple. You know, concrete poetry was a movement in the 1950s that tried for sort of a transnational language in poetry. You could write in any language, but it was a visual language, and kind of like Esperanto, you really didn't have to speak the language to understand it. So of course everybody understands this. This is from a great Swiss poet called Eugen Brauninger, or this beautiful piece called Wind. Very, very simple pieces. And in 96, I guess it was January of 95, I first saw the Netscape browser and the graphical web after having used Unix for a long time. And I just couldn't believe how beautifully graphic all the work looked. And they began to remind me of this kind of stuff, concrete poetry. Of course, later, now we're used to seeing words swirl around in every ad and every flash little piece on the web. But early on, these very simple pieces began to look very fresh to me. And so as time went on, I decided, and bandwidth increased, I decided to get involved with sound poetry. And of course, the greatest sound poet of all, which many people don't know, was Kirsch Bitters, and he did the best sound poem of the 20th century was called the Ephemera. This is the score for it, and by streaming sound on the web, you can actually do things, really, just be able to sort of follow along. I'll just do this for a second. This is an early version of the Ephemera.
Spricht Teile seiner Sonate mit Urlauten.
It starts over here in this version. So it becomes this kind of, I want to say avant-garde, because when I went to school, and I got out of school in the mid-80s, you couldn't use the word avant-garde. It had all these sort of matriarchal connotations, and it was modernist connotations. It was a postmodern time. It was verboten to kind of dig things like this. But the web has sort of like brought back the idea of multimedia and intermedia and interdisciplinary. I mean, today everybody, of course, this seems very primitive, but of course everybody today on the side of the laptop is mixing, remixing. Everybody is doing Photoshop while they're doing sound, and of course all the tools that now, of course, come bundled with a Mac allow you to do that. So in a weird way, the kind of utopian side of modernism and the utopian side of the avant-garde has kind of made this kind of weird revenge. And so we don't think twice about being intermedia or being multimedia. One of the great problems I had was, so we had sound, we had concrete poetry and visual poetry and sound poetry, but then I had a problem, and the problem was somebody by the name of John Cage, who, in John Cage's work, does all sorts of things together. He does sound poetry, and he'll do a sound poetry reading, Cage doing a sound poetry reading, accompanied by an orchestra playing avant-garde, 20th century aleatory classical music. And it was just sort of like, but wait, that it is sound poetry, but it's not sound poetry. You know, it is music, but do I want to sort of get into that? And suddenly it just occurred to me, it's like, right, I think this thing has got to open up and become avant-garde, whatever that means. And from that moment on, I just kind of decided to make up my idea of what's avant-garde. And it became this enormous resource that's called UbuWeb. Now this is just, it's absolutely ridiculous what's here. I don't even know what's here. There's thousands and thousands of artists. There's 4 terabytes of media. There's, at this point, probably 3,000 films, untold numbers of MP3s. I mean, I don't even know. And I love kind of going through the archive and finding things that I didn't know was even there. And people are contributing. Somebody will email me and say, oh, I've got something great, and they'll FTP it up. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like it might fit in. Let's put it in there. And so I'm always discovering things myself. I mean, look at this. I mean, here's the entire run of Distill magazine. I mean, the entire thing going, you know. And they're all PDFs and absolutely gorgeous things. I'd forgotten this was there, but God, they're really good. Somebody just contributed that. It's like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And so there's some problems with this, and there's a lot of problems with this. You know, here's a big trove of Brecht's audio works, an enormous group of recordings. These are historical recordings. Oh, this is so great. This is Bertolt Brecht singing Mac the Knife. Brecht's voice. It's like, I can't just do one thing. I've got all sorts of windows cracked. And this again is a sort of intermediate, the way that we work with it. There's also beautiful things. This is Brecht's entire testimony before the House Un-American Activities Committee from 1947, which is incredible. And then there's all these BBC radio plays, and these are hours and hours, and they're so good. And the best thing to do is to download these things and put them on an iPod on a long drive and listen to 10 hours of Brecht plays. I mean, they're just absolutely beautiful. This one, the Life of Galileo, is just incredible to listen to. It's all of these kind of free-floating, weird things about the avant-garde. Now, I talked about problems. Let me talk about some more problems. If the largest section on Ubu is the sound section, and this is just goes on and on and on and on and on. Again, I can't even tell what's here. And in again, like Cage, there's layers and layers and layers of things. I think on Ubu alone, with Cage alone, there's probably 40 hours worth of MP3s from Cage, and this just goes on. It's crazy. And then the other very large section is the film and video section, which again, these are just hours and hours and hours of films by sort of everyone. What's the problem here? The problem here is that kind of almost everything is illegal, and almost nothing has permission. And I just do it, and nobody seems to care. It's this bizarre thing. I mean, there's only one site like this on the web, and this is it, where everything is downloadable. I don't put anything up on UbuWeb that you can't download, because quite frankly, I don't believe in cloud computing. I don't trust the cloud. As we saw with the recent mega upload meltdown, all these people who literally built castles made of sand on mega upload and these kind of nefarious cloud-based computing lost everything. So the idea of the cloud is they'll work it out, but it's not good now. As a matter of fact, if I didn't have a password, I couldn't get on to the internet here. And I was just in China and at a conference there, and all of the conferees brought their papers on the cloud, on Google Docs. Guess what? Got to China, no Google. You know. So I'm really suspicious. I'm deeply suspicious of the cloud. I mean, it's really easy to censor. It's easy to take down. Of course, China loves it. So if you go into, this is incredible. This is actually, here we are. It's Fred Astaire going on in there, right? Bojangles from Harlem Swing Time. But you look at this, and you see how absolutely in touch and you know, truly avant-garde this is. Would you turn that music up and touch on as high as we can go? You realize this is 3 guys in sync behind you. So I love that. I'm so glad to be able to show it to you, and I'm glad to be streaming it for you, my students, whoever wants to watch it. But in fact, the big secret here is that this link under here, if you follow this, it's a link to an API, which can be downloaded. And so if you're teaching, and you know, you're very lucky here, this is a very privileged university to have fast Wi-Fi, but you know, many places don't have these, you know, don't have the luxury of having these things. So you've got to take things with you. And you know, you're on a bus, the bus doesn't have Wi-Fi, take the API. And so again, I believe that everything, you should never bookmark on the web. You should always download. Because you know, we assume the web is going to be here forever. We assume this is the way it's going to be. But in fact, most of the time the web is extremely unstable. And if you really love something, and you really want something, and you think you're going to need it, PDF it, download it, save a copy to your drive, and then of course be sure to back up. So getting back to the kind of idea that copyright doesn't exist, and I think I've managed to actually come up with a pretty interesting idea about copyright. UbuWeb has been going for 16 years without any permission. These things come from font sharing, they come from weirdos like you. Somebody's going to come up to me after this lecture and say, you know, I've got all these incredible Man Ray movies, you know, I got great, why don't you just upload them on Ubu? Now, if we had to ask the estate of Man Ray for permission to do that, which, you know, say Cranbrook wanted to do this, they would have to ask the estate of Man Ray, and they'd have to negotiate maybe a little fee, have a lawyer write some contracts. If there's any kind of you know, music that's being used in the Man Ray films that is not by Man Ray, there's got to be separate licensing deals made for that. There's got to be royalties paid out. There's got to be all sorts of things. And this is why when you go to the Museum of Modern Art's website, you go to MoMA's website, it tells you what's on display, and it tells you what they have for lunch today in the cafeteria. They give you a menu, and they tell you what's on. What's MoMA sitting on? MoMA is sitting on troves and troves and troves of stuff. UbuWeb, which runs on no money, I don't touch money, shames MoMA. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing. You know, if UbuWeb was to be built today the right way, and this is why I keep saying this problem is wrong, if it was to be built the right way, it would take millions and millions of dollars to do this thing right. Which is really, in a weird way, why, you know, nobody's ever come up to me and said, you know, we'd really like to buy that site. Because it's a rat's nest. But then again, you know, YouTube looked like a rat's nest too, right? And Google had the money to actually straighten that whole thing out and kind of begin to deal with it. So maybe it's not impossible, but I don't see anybody banging down my door. And the reason is that the artifacts that are hosted on Ubu are extremely important. They're they're life-changing historic documents that are economically worthless. You know? And if you try to put out those 40 or 50 hours of John Cage lectures, you would lose money. And people have tried, and people lose money all the time. It's a disaster. It's a labor of love, but you can't do it. So you have this kind of whole idea of ephemera, you know, artist's ephemera. And Ubu is like an artist's ephemera dream. It takes artistic production and turns it on its head. And this is one of my favorite things. This is a sound artist named Jean Dubuffet. And you can listen to some of his absolutely crazy music on print from 1961. Okay, it's music brute, right? And he was great. Jean Dubuffet, whose painting I just actually saw in the storage room of the museum, which is also very beautiful. Jean Dubuffet did all this incredible music. Of course, nobody ever knows about the music of Jean Dubuffet. So you can't, I mean, people have tried to put this out. Again, you're going to lose money. But the idea is that because Ubu gives this stuff away, I've got all these weird emails from people saying, I love this musician named Jean Dubuffet. He's incredible. And later they find out, he's also a painter, right? So you invert artistic production and you forefront ephemera and you background market, you circumvent market. Now, to me, this is really exciting. And I mean, I've always been much more interested in democratic notions of distribution than I've been excited about something that's very beautiful that, of course, I can never buy and I can never possess. And this is one of the reasons I became interested in doing UbuWeb in the first place, because I've been a mad collector of records and weird little books that artists have done, and Super 8 films and all that kind of great stuff that artists do, and then that the market tends not to pay any attention to. So on Ubu, we've got the music of Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp, you didn't know that he wrote this beautiful aleatory music, absolutely incredible, pre-Cage aleatory music, fantastic. The music of Marcel Duchamp. You have got the videos of Richard Serra. Nobody knows Richard Serra is. I think he's a wonderful sculptor, but he's a really good video artist too. And he's made incredibly weird videos. So Museum of Modern Art, I'm sorry to keep picking on MoMA, but I think they can handle it. Museum of Modern Art does a retrospective of Richard Serra's work, but there's not a single video in there. I mean, I thought that was an insult. I thought Richard Serra might have been very upset about it. I mean, who knows? But so this kind of inversion is something I'm extremely interested in. And so again, if you just kind of flip through here, this is music of Yanis Xenakis. This is a Godard film called British Sounds, which is his most didactic Marxist film. It's unwatchable. This is not Gene Sieber, and Jean-Paul Belmondo hopping around Paris. This is just hard didactic Marxism. Nobody seems to care that it's up on Ubu. And you kind of get this kind of great pass. Oh, you're actually interested in that? Have that. This is a marvelous thing. This is Gertrude Stein and Virgil Thompson. Beautiful. They collaborated on an opera with an all-African American cast that was premiered in 1934. This is a historic recording of Stein and Thompson. Of course, nobody's interested in it, but us. So this is the kind of the whole thing, the beautiful interviews and performances of the avant-garde turned Marxist composer Cornelius Cardew. And I can go on and on and on and on with this. Now, a couple of things about it. As I said, it runs on no money. The server space is all donated by an art school, a wonderful design school in Mexico City called Centra. I don't know how many of you know that, but it's a cinema school and a design school. And I was down there for a conference, and Ubu kind of jumps around because, quite frankly, how many people are going to host 4 terabytes of hot material? Very few places. And so every few years we get kicked off of servers. And we also suck an enormous amount of bandwidth. At last count, it was 2 gigabytes a second of bandwidth we were pulling. Now, if I have to pay that bill, it would be absolutely insane. But of course, I don't have to pay that bill. Centro has to pay that bill. And somehow, the art school makes that possible because they actually believe in the project. I mean, the worst thing that can happen to you is if you have a blog and you get slashed on it, or you get boing-boinged, and everybody adores your meme. And what do? You get a $3,000 bill from your ISP at the end of the month for the bandwidth that you exceeded, or in fact, the thing gets shut down. So, I mean, it's wonderful getting boing boing or slashed on it, but it's also going to cost you a lot of money. I don't touch money. I don't take it. And somebody here kind of comes up to me and says, I want to give you $1 million to run UbuWeb. I say, thank you. I'm not interested. I can't touch money because if I took money, then I would be obliged to start paying out the thousands of artists on Ubu. That wouldn't be right. So it's this kind of like kind of contract that sort of has managed to settle in and work itself out okay. So no money touches hands. And all the stuff is hosted. The HTML, I mostly do it. You know, the curation, I mostly do it. And so what's happened, and this is really, here's another thing that's really wrong with this site. It's really poorly done. It's like some guys, it's a Wunderkammer. Some guy's idea of what the avant-garde should be. You know, if MoMA did this site, they would do it right. They would do it with real historians. And if I do something like this, if I go, I'll show you how bad this is. I'll show you how bad this is. Well, I don't know. I just go to the Godard. Let's go to the Godard moment. This is a film that Godard did with D.A. Pennebaker, which is amazing, called 1 p.m. 77 minutes from 72. Anyway, with Eldridge Cleaver and Jefferson Airplane and Grace Slick. I mean, it's fantastic. Again, if I had to really host this thing, I would have to negotiate music rights with the Jefferson Airplane and Grace Slick. You know, it would take gazillions of dollars. And D.A. Pennebaker, of course, but you know what they're saying. Okay. Okay, so here's what's wrong with it. Let me start here. I don't know where this text came from. I just found it somewhere on the web. I don't know if this text is right. It's probably wrong. There's probably typos in it. Oh, it came from this place. WordPress.com. Who is that? I don't know. I thought, I don't want to just put shit up. I wanted to have some kind of, context. I get all these emails all the time. It's wrong. Well, of course it's wrong. What do you think? I have a staff to write this stuff? And then, if you go back to Godard's page, it's absolutely ridiculous. Here's 5 things here of Godard's. It's his very first film, which is a documentary about a concrete plant, which is rarely seen. It's really cool. And then you've got 2 documentaries. You've got Godard in America, this Tannhauser documentary. You've got this crazy Marxist thing. And this, I just have to show you this. This is a shit commercial that Godard made in 1971. It's only a minute, but it's really good. So again, I don't know. So why is it there? Why is that there and not something else? I don't know. It looked kind of cool to me. It looked better than the films that he's famous for. I don't want to put the films that he's famous for up because, quite frankly, you can get those on Netflix. They're good. And you have to distinguish between economies also. You can say, I'm just all for copyright. I'm against copyright. I'm actually not against copyright. I realize that there are several types of copyright. There's Godard films that make money, and then there's many Godard films that don't make money. Lady Gaga is not on UbuWeb, nor should she be. And Lady Gaga has a legit multi-gazillion-dollar economy, and she'd be crazy not to protect it, right? So you have to understand. I think the conversation around copyright is very clumsy. It's very, very clumsy and very blanketed. It's a very nuanced kind of idea. Sometimes I get a sense of what I can get away with. Once in a while, I put my feet into waters that they shouldn't be, and I get shut down. I had these beautiful Harold Pinter plays from the BBC up on Ubu. And the minute they went up, somehow they sniffed it out, and I got a cease and desist letter from the BBC, take it down. Of course, somebody asked me to take something down. I try to argue with them. I try to say, hey, BBC, you know, those Pinter plays are really valuable. They're not in print. You can't get them. You guys aren't streaming them. What can we do this? And a lot of the time that really works, and a lot of the time that really doesn't. And so they'll say, you know, absolutely not, take it down. And I've learned also with these things is that you actually get 3 chances. Nobody will ever sue you right off the bat. They'll say, we see you're hosting something on the site, can you please take it down? And if you don't respond, you get a second letter. Say, we've sent you a letter, please take it down. And then if you don't respond, you get a third letter that says, we've sent you 2 fucking letters, take it down, and we're going to call our lawyers next time. So, you know, I'm trying to cut it off at the first thing. And I do, and there's a lot of dialogue. And you see, this is sort of the thing that I actually end up getting much more interested in. On Ubu, the content kind of takes care of itself. I mean, really, it's full of good stuff. I kind of know it's good. And that's the other thing about Ubu, is that it's not a democracy, it's not YouTube. It's insanely hard to get your work on Ubu. And that's why it's so good. Everybody says, oh, but you're anti-copyright, you're always talking about Marxism and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, but the reason is I really do think that democracy is a bad thing for art. And you know, and you need curation. And this is why places like archive.org are a disaster. Everybody can put everything up on archive.org, but nobody is going to bother to filter that mess out and tell you what's good. So I actually am a huge believer in the idea of curation and filtration. Anything that you're going to find on UbuWeb is good. Now, you won't find UbuWeb on Google. You'll find it on, well, I took it off of Google. You'll find it on all the bad search engines, Bing, Dogpile, Ask Jeeves. We're really big on Alta Vista. You know, all the ones that everybody, you know, I mean, nobody uses any of the other ones. And one of the reasons is that I began getting all these weird cease and desists from people who had put Google alerts onto artists' names. And by the way, this is never artists. Artists don't do this. Artists get it. And it's an artist website. This is what artists do. This is what we do. You want to do it? You do it. You ask permission? No. You never ask permission. You just do it. That's what, you know, it's wrong. Artists like things that are wrong. This is an art. This is the way we work, right? It makes sense to us. I mean, the rest of the world doesn't quite see it that way. And that they get, you know, so they assume, first of all, a copyright holder, say there's a sound poet, and a very good sound poet, a very historically important sound poet, who passes away, and the archive goes to his sister in Iowa, and the sister says, aha, this is, my brother's archive is worth millions of dollars. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I mean, little do they know that, of course, you know, in terms of sort of sound poetry, it's worth absolutely nothing. But they'll send an angry letter saying, take it down! And then I've got to send a letter back and say, but wait, we're not selling anything. We're good guys. We're actually on your side. We're actually promoting your brother's work. And we're happy to promote your brother's work because we love it, because we're fans of it. And we go back and forth. And finally, they go, oh, great. I mean, you're not selling anything? Fantastic. Keep it up there. This is really good. And this is great. And I consider this to be a great victory. But it's an awful lot of work. And I've got a full-time job. I've got 2 kids. I've got a writing career. I've got all sorts of things. I can't be involved in this level of correspondence. I just can't do it. So I removed it from Google, and they all went away. You know, it was great. And it's also underground, man. You know, fuck. You know, the culture before MTV and everything. You know, you just have an underground. The only way you could, you know, get, you know, somebody would hand you a record, and it was like, this is the coolest record in the world, and I'm going to give you this record, and you're not going to find that at Tower Records or whatever. I'm going to give it to you. And it's just like, there's this whole underground. So UbuWeb has really gone underground, and the only way you can get to it, of course, it's on Google, but it's people that link to things from it. So somebody does a cool blog, there's a link to Ubu, you go, great, you know. So you so the right people seem to be finding out about it. I don't care that it's not on Google. I don't care if 3 people come. I don't care if 3 million people come. What does it matter to me? There's no advertising, so I don't get revenue from hits or banners, or there's no donation box. I closed the damn thing down before I put a donation box up there. Kickstarter? Yuck. Boo. You know, you don't need money. You don't need money to do things on the web. Really, you really don't need money to do things on the web. And so, gee whiz, I could talk for much longer. I'm going to finish up with one, and I'm becoming like Lenny Bruce a little bit. I'm becoming much more obsessed with my legal issues and my copyright issues than I am with the artistic issues on Ubu. I've become such a great expert in copyright over these years. And to me, if art isn't engaging in these issues today, and to me these are the issues of our day: copyright, file sharing, legality, downloading, memes, distribution. Distribution to me is much more interesting than any artwork I've seen. The idea of pointing, the idea that Boing Boing is the most powerful blog on the internet without ever creating anything. Again, it's about filtration. They point at something, and the fact that Boing Boing points at something is always trumps the thing to which they're pointing. So I'm getting interested in all this sort of meta idea about the web and about distribution, and to me seeming to be the most interesting and most important artwork. So I'll finish up this talk, because it's almost time for me to stop, with my favorite cease and desist letter I ever got. And this one is I just love. So one day, not that long ago, it was October of 2010, and Sunday was coming on Friday afternoons. I got this. And it's from the Andrew Wiley Agency, which is the most powerful literary agency. I mean, they deal with all the Nobel Prize people and all that stuff. And they also, because Andrew Wiley used to actually be a beat poet and used to publish the work of William S. Burroughs, he represents the estate of William S. Burroughs. So I one day got this formal DMCA takedown notice. And this is scary to get when you first get these things. And by the way, I want to end this talk about talking about how copyright is really used as a threat when it actually really doesn't exist. You own a blog, you put an MP3 blog up, and you get one of these, man, right? Look at this. You start shaking, right? Look at this down here. This is scary stuff, right? Well, you know what? It really isn't. It's just a fucking boilerplate thing that they're doing. Okay? Please note that these works are protected by copyright. I worked with the copyright holder and confirmed that the use of this material in such a fashion is not authorized by the copyright holder. And then this is my favorite one. Under penalty of perjury, in a United States court of law, I state that the information contained in this notification is accurate and that I am authorized to act on behalf of the exclusive rights holder for the material in question. This is not accurate. Not at all. As a matter of fact, this woman perjured herself by sending me this thing. So what they did was they put the name William S. Burroughs into the search engine on Ubu, and they cut and pasted the entire thing, the internal search engine. So if I was to go to here, this page goes to a thing on Ubu by a wonderful artist named Momus. I'm sure many of you know Nick Curry, and brilliant guy. And Nick gave us all of these things for UbuWeb. He gave us all of his old work and how I rate this now, and these are just pop songs. I was like, Nick, there's no Burroughs on here, so let me do a little search for Burroughs. B-U-R-R-O-U-G. Ah, it's in a liner note. Right. You own this liner note? Really? These lyrics were composed via Burroughs-Geisen Bowie cut-up technique. In fact, Drunk on Powdered Milk and Gas comes directly from a Burroughs novel. Oh, so you're not allowed to cite it. Oh, but wait, maybe there's Burroughs samples in the thing. Let's listen. Maybe. Did they listen?
This part of town is all flat finished beautiful women.
Absolutely not. So what they're doing here is pure intimidation. I'll show you another one that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, there's so many here that are absolutely ridiculous. Oh, I don't know. Here's an academic paper, A Brief History of Appropriative Writing. Oh, taking a cue from William Burroughs, whose books were patched together. Oh, another citation. Gee, and that's the only one. Take it down, we own that. So you understand, this is happening all the time. I wrote her back. I think I actually have the correspondence here, because I like it. I said, please note that these works are protected by copyright. I responded, I said, we believe that they are as well, but many copyrights are not yours, and therefore you have no claim on them, right? And I work with a copyright holder, blah, blah, blah. While some might be, much of it I know isn't. For example, you don't hold the copyright to Moses' work, to name one of many. Under the penalty of law, this information is not at all accurate. I say, while I'm happy to correct the violations that are actually yours, the cutting and pasting of an internet search based on the name William S. Burroughs and claiming that anything on the site with that name is yours is not helpful in achieving your goal. So I'm not, I'm kind of nice, but I'm like, you can't fuck with me. and then, oh, thank you for your, then they become very nice. I was really sentimental, and you realize that I'll double check and get back to you, and so you realize that it's some intern, some undergraduate summer intern or something who's forced to do this terrible work and execute the, throwing around their sort of legal thing. So, okay, I don't, it's 6:44, and I could get very Lenny Bruce about this and really bore you to tears, but I think I'll stop here and take a question or two if anybody has a question. Yes.
How did that situation resolve itself?
With Burroughs?
Yeah.
Well, as it turns out, the estate didn't own anything there. As if all the copyright was with, the audio works were with Jorno Poetry Systems, John Jorno's record label. So they actually had to go through John to get those copyrights. The films are owned by Anthony Ball and not by Burroughs. There's no, it's actually very strange because a lot of times artists actually don't own their own work. The copyright resides with the magazine in question, not the artists don't own their own work. And this is very good for you to know as artists, is that you should retain your own copyright if you wish to keep a claim on that. As a matter of fact, I went back and forth with Yoko Ono's people. That was pretty hairy, right? The most money in the world, they were kind of upset about some stuff. And I wanted to pull the same trick on Yoko Ono's people saying you don't own the copyright, but when I began looking back at her stuff from the 60s from, say, Aspen magazine, in fact, she said copyright at 1966, John Lennon and Yoko Ono. But Yoko Ono turned out really good. Because I always say, look, okay, so I know we don't have permission, but we're good guys. Can do somebody like Yoko Ono? Can we have permission? And he said, and they're very nice. He comes back, he says, let me ask her. He comes back the next day. He says, yeah, Yoko thinks Ubu's cool. You can have permission. As long as you don't make them available for download. I said, sure. So, it's sort of sweet, and I get the sense that a lot of these lawyers don't believe what the clients are telling them. They get it. You're not selling anything. You're going to throw out all this good money to go for somebody who really has no money. I don't have any money. You can't get anything from me. So, okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting many words. Any other questions? I'll talk a little bit more. I'll tell you another thing, that because nobody else has, the reason I said why aren't there 10 or 100 or 1,500 UbuWebs is because of this copyright intimidation. So what's happened is this stupid site, this dumb little hobby of mine has been mistaken for an institution. It's been mistaken for history, or perhaps it's taught here. I know it's taught in many places. So this kind of weird, subjective history of the avant-garde, because it's the only thing available, and it really is rather half-assed, has become the kind of default go-to for this history, which I think is a problem. Not really my problem, but I think it is a problem, and it should be remedied. The best thing that can happen, honestly, is that somebody does this right, does this thing right. put all the money behind it, get all the scholarship, get it right, and then nobody would go to Ubu anymore. And I'd go on and do other things, which I'd actually like to do. Yeah.
Is there a warning or a disclaimer on the site saying that some of the writing or analysis might be suspect?
No, I don't. You know what? I don't know. Go. You don't like it? Go somewhere else. You know, nobody's forcing you to go here. You know, that's also the other thing. I get complaint letters sometimes, like the quality is poor. I love poor quality. It should be poor because I think good distribution. If I was to actually really play some of these, I'll tell you this funny story. The Lincoln Center approached me 2 summers ago, and they said, we want to do a night of film from Ubu. And we're going to do it at the Walter Reed Theater, which is the biggest, most important cinema screen in New York City. I mean, this is the place where the best films get shown in the best resolution. And I said, sure, we can do it, but you have to show AVIs off the computer. You may not go get good copies, right? And so we showed them, and each pixel was about the size of this mountain. It was horrible. It was 2 hours of misery. And my point was like, cinema should be respected. Good quality cinema needs to be respected. If your art, your artistic field is threatened by a 2-inch by 2-inch screen with horrible resolution, then this is really your problem. This is not my problem. People say, oh, UbuWeb is destroying cinema. Not at all. Cinema is alive and well. Cinema is social. This is a social thing. Sitting alone in a lonely room with a crappy 2-inch thing watching a Godard movie, that's sad to me. That's real, that's pathetic. This is not cinema. And you can't kill an art form by doing that. You know, on the other hand, and this is the paradox of Ubu, is that most people, I don't know what they have, but could you go see the movie British Sounds at an art house downtown? Where are we, Bloomington Hills? They can show the Marxist. Actually, it's about auto manufacturing as well. And no, of course not. So for a lot of people, I don't think it's the real thing, because I happen to live in New York City where these things are being shown all the time. I can see the real thing, but for many people, this has become the real thing. The photograph of the painting has become the painting, right? I mean, this has happened in painting for a long time, but now it's happening on the internet. Yes?
2 questions. The first one is, there was just probably some weird scrolling problem, but what's the name of democracy again? Like archive.whatever?
Archive.org?
That's the one. Number 2 is, you talk about never touching money, but were you asked to, did you get paid to talk about Ubu today?
Yes, I did get paid to talk about it.
How does that work?
Well, it goes to paying my server costs. You see this right up here? You see, this is the money I put out, is to keep this beautiful little URL, which is a very valuable thing. This is a 3-letter symmetrical URL that is not only symmetrical, but also translates into English, UBU, right? So I get all these companies asking me, we'd love to buy your domain name. I am obliged from the person that gave it to me never to sell it. So I always have the pleasure of writing it back and saying this is reserved for poetry. There's small expenses that are associated with the site, and as a result, I get paid a modest fee to speak in front of you. Believe me, it's modest. So, probably pays for some hard drives. Honestly, and not much
There's
more.
always like some small cost to keep something going.
But believe me, for these small lectures that I do, there's actually a lot more out-of-pocket costs that I do. Not to mention my time, which is all volunteer. I put my kids to bed, I pour a big glass of bourbon, and from about 9:30 to midnight every night, I work on this. For 16 years, this is sort of what I do. So as the very much missed, Mike Kelly said, more love hours than can ever be repaid.
I know you mentioned in the beginning that you don't necessarily know how to define avant-garde, but I'm wondering if you could speak to how you filter content, if you do have to actually turn away content ever?
You know, it's, well, I don't know, I don't know, it's intuitive. It's not programmatic in any way. What do I know? I'm a poet. You know, what do I know? I'm not an art historian, so I can't define it. So it's a beautiful thing is that it starts to sprawl in all these different directions. I'll show you my favorite thing about it, and this really to me just defines the whole thing. In the film and video section, it's this. Right here, you have, oh, I can't highlight it here, but you have Samuel Beckett next to Captain Beefheart. Okay, so it's films of Beefheart, and it's the films of Beckett, right? And what other context in the world do you catch Beckett and Beefheart together? Never. And yet you think, of course, Beefheart never could have existed without Beckett. And to me, this is the natural kind of slush of what I consider to be avant-garde, which creates a sort of amazing conversation between characters that are unlikely. I don't like the art world, because the art world doesn't put Samuel Beckett and Captain Beefheart in the same room. They put Captain Beefheart as Don Van Vliet, the abstract expressionist painter on the walls, and they'll put a Beckett and Jasper Johns collaboration perhaps, but they wouldn't think to do that. And to me, you know, like Ubu has just been this kind of like reinvention of for me, of what I wish the art world was. You know, the utopian invention, what it used to be, you know, it's kind of like the idea of the Judson Church, you know, where Claes Oldenburg would be doing a performance, and you'd have, you know, John Cage, performing with music by John Cage, and you'd have poets that were dancers and dancers that were, you know, that were novelists. And, you know, art's messy, you know, and the art world isn't messy. And I'm really interested in impurity and mess. And so that's really my answer. It's a slushy, messy thing, and it's mine, and I can do it. You know. Yes.
I was just going to ask, think about his mind, and would you ever turn over this to somebody else? Like if it became a project that you just could no longer kind of see through, with time commitments being what they are, could you imagine this existing without you?
No, I don't think about it. I have no plans. It's not my will. If I was to die on the plane back to New York, if we went back from Detroit, I guess that would be the end of Ubu. But it could die for a million reasons, you know? I can't believe it's been going this long. I could get sued out of my brains, which would shut it down in a minute. I could get, on my service base, my bandwidth could be called, which has happened before. Bye-bye. I can't afford that. Or I could simply get bored and blow it up one day because I want to. I don't want to do it anymore. You know? Sorry, you can get your money back. I'll send you your money back, after I blow it up. You know? Because, you know, people, anyway, it's all that, right? It's a lot of freedom. Yeah, what's your question?
I know you're a collector, so probably things that you come across that seem really interesting don't get out of your grasp too often, but I wonder if there's anything that you run across in your life that you really wish you could find again to put on UbuWeb to share with people?
Well, I think that's a really good question, because, you know, the reason I started was because I'm a crazy collector, and collectors only want to share with other people. So I've got 10,000 vinyls at home. But they suck. I don't use them because I can't share them with people. They're no fun, you know. So it's back to the lonely guy in the room listening to his vinyls. You know, I'm one of those sad record collector guys and geeks. And so the idea, and this is the thing with file sharing. People get off on sharing things with other people. Having it is no fun. Nobody wants to have it. You only have it so you can share it. And this is why Napster exploded the way it did. You know, so I mean, right now, I once in a while I'll go over to my record shelf and I'll pull off, oh, I haven't digitized that one. God, it would be great to share this one. How cool is that? You know, so this kind of moving and sharing of information is the way that things really are going today. And you know, like I notice on Twitter, everybody wants to be the one that announces it, somebody's death. Right? We've all become kind of breaking news agents somehow. We want to break the big story. And I think it's kind of a really beautiful and natural impulse, because it's the impulse to want to really share and move information. I mean, why do people retweet you know, deaths all the time. My Twitter feed is just full of people dead. So it's the same impulse, you know, and I think it's really, really cool and really healthy. I'm not interested in these things anymore. I'm interested in sharing them. And so this is an archive of all my cool things that I collected that I want to share with you. And then hopefully you'll share with other people. Yeah.
Do you give your users the opportunity to blog with each other and
No.
comment? And
No, boo. I hate community. I don't have a say. No, you don't have a say. I have a say. They can go build their own communities, but no, there's none of that. Absolutely, I don't care about community. I don't have to care about community. Nor do I have to care about diversity. Okay? I mean, if I was getting funded by NEA or something, I'd have to show proper diversity. This is a very biased site. I like diversity and I want more diversity on UbuWeb. But quite frankly, this is a pretty white, male, Western site because the history of the avant-garde is pretty much slanted in that direction. I wish it was otherwise, and I often try. For example, we have a partnership with Badun magazine, which is avant-garde arts from the Middle East, and they supply us with the most wonderful Middle Eastern content, which I think is fantastic. Only because I think the work is fantastic, you know. So there's no mandates here. I don't need community because I really don't care. What do I care what people have to think about it? It's just a thing it's a thing I'm doing. And you can't embed the videos. I make it so you can't embed the videos. There's no chat rooms. I'm told UbuWeb has a Facebook page, but I don't do it. I kind of don't care. And the Twitter feed, which I do have for Ubu, is useful because if the site goes down, I can tell people the server went down. And that's a sharing thing, but that's a one-way street. I'm not interested in back and forth in that way. What do I need? I'm not getting paid, you know. I don't have to please anyone but myself. Yes.
Out of all these thousands of artworks, like how come Alfred Jerry was recently added?
How come Jerry was what?
Alfred Jerry? I noticed that Alfred Jerry was recently added.
Alfred Jerry was added? Was recently added? You know, because I had so many. So my pataphysical joke about Ubu was that I would never have Alfred Jerry on there. Right? That was my pataphysical joke. But I began getting so many marvelous things, artifacts of productions of UbuWeb and chansons by the College of Pataphysique. I mean, amazing stuff from the 50s. I was like, oh my God, forget it. Just break your rule, share it, because it's so beautiful. So yeah, so I wrote one, say I can make the rule, I can break it. All right, so anyway, it's 7 o'clock, I think maybe we should end. So thank you very much.